Officer Caleb Hart was just walking his usual patrol near the old train trestle when he heard something that didn't belong. A muffled whimper, low and trembling beneath the steel. What he found nearly stopped his heart. 4 German shepherds, 1 adult, and 3 barely weaned pups were tied, blindfolded, and left to die on the tracks as a freight train thundered toward them. He had seconds, and somehow he saved them all. But why were they left there? Who could commit such cruelty and walk away? And if Caleb hadn't been there in that exact moment, what would have been left behind when the train passed through? This is a story that may break your heart, but also heal it. Before we dive in, drop your country in the comments. I want to see where our global family is watching from. The fog rolled in thick and low over the railroad tracks just outside of Maple Ridge, a quiet mountain town in eastern Pennsylvania. The October air smelled of wet pine, rust, and distant chimney smoke, the kind of day where sound moved slowly and the world felt paused between breaths. Officer Caleb Hart moved along the gravel path that hugged the old train trestle, his boots silent over damp stone. 36 years old, tall and solidly built, Caleb carried the quiet weight of a man who had seen just enough sorrow to understand its silence. His storm-gray eyes scanned with practiced care, his short brown hair still damp from the morning mist. A 5 o'clock shadow crept across his jawline. He hadn't meant to skip shaving, but the days had been running together lately. He had come to Maple Ridge 3 years ago, after resigning from the city force in Harrisburg. The chaos, the sirens, the endless breaking points, it had worn him thin. Here, he found quiet. And in the quiet, he tried to rebuild what the job had taken from him. He paused at the center of the bridge, letting his gaze drift over the Lehigh River below. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A muffled whimper low, trembling, and wrong-echoed up from beneath the steel rails. Caleb stilled. He tilted his head, letting the world go quiet. There it was again. Not the wind. Not wildlife. Pain. He moved fast, boots crunching gravel, heart thudding. The sound came from beneath the bridge near the base of the embankment where the railroad maintenance path pinched close to the support beams. He slid down the slope on instinct, grabbing at thorny brush and cold rock to keep his balance. The fog closed around him like a curtain. And then he saw them. 4 dogs, German shepherds, 1 adult, 3 puppies, all bound, all blindfolded. They were wrapped in rough burlap sacks, twine knotted around their legs and over their eyes, lying in a huddle near the steel rail. Their bodies shook from cold, fear, or both. The adult, clearly the mother, shifted slightly as she heard Caleb's footsteps. Her ears strained forward, though one was bent at the tip, as if it had been broken long ago and healed wrong. Her coat was a sable blend of dusk and copper, but patchy, with old bruises showing beneath. She growled softly, not out of aggression, but out of fear. Still, she pushed her muzzle toward the 3 puppies as if shielding them. The pups were tiny, no more than 8 or 9 weeks old. One had a darker mask over his face, the other 2 smaller and visibly weaker, their paws trembling as they pressed into their mother's warmth. And the rails began to hum. Caleb looked up. A distant headlight bloomed in the trees, the curved track bending it just out of full view, but it was coming, and fast. His instincts kicked in. He dropped to one knee, pulling the utility knife from his belt. "Easy, girl," he murmured, voice low and steady. "You're not alone." He cut the bindings at the pup's legs first, starting with the smallest, who whimpered as the twine came loose. Then the second, then the third. The rope had left swollen rings in their fur. The train horn blared once, long and deep. No time. Caleb sliced through the knot around the mother's front legs, then slipped an arm beneath her chest. She tensed, but didn't resist. The pups clung close as if their lives still depended on the weight of her ribs. With one sweeping motion, Caleb scooped the mother into his arms. Heavy, limp, but breathing, and called the pups sharply. "Come on, let's go." Somehow they followed. He scrambled up the embankment, boots sliding on the wet gravel, breath short. The sound of steel against steel roared louder behind him, wind screaming through the trestle. He crossed the last timber tie, feeling the vibration rattle up his spine. They tumbled into a patch of frozen grass just as the freight train tore past. The noise was deafening. Heat and grit punched the air. Sparks flew from the rail joints. Caleb shielded the dogs with his body, arms curled around the mother. The puppies buried themselves into the crook of his legs. Then silence. The world held its breath. Slowly, Caleb lifted his head. His hands were shaking, his heart pounding. The mother dog turned her muzzle toward his palm and licked it once, softly, as if to say, "Thank you." He let out a shaky breath. "Yeah," he whispered, "you're safe now." A rustle behind him made him turn. Across the road, just beyond the fence line, a figure stood near a mailbox. Myra Duval, a widow in her late 60s, short and broad-shouldered from years of gardening and raising goats. Her gray hair was tied into a loose bun, her eyes sharp behind silver-rimmed glasses. She wore a patchwork coat and rubber boots speckled with mud. She lived nearby. Caleb had helped her fix a broken fence 2 months ago. She rarely spoke unless it mattered. Right now, she wasn't speaking, just watching. And further behind her, parked by the tree line, was an old rust-colored pickup truck, still idling. Caleb narrowed his eyes. He'd never seen that truck in town before. But when he looked again, it was gone. Mara walked over slowly, holding a folded wool blanket in her arms. "You'll want this," she said simply. He took it with a nod, wrapping it around the shivering pups. Kaya, the name came unbidden, like it had always been hers, rested her head against his thigh. Mara's voice was quiet. Someone meant to erase them. Caleb didn't answer, but he felt it, deep in his bones. This wasn't just cruelty. This was deliberate, and someone had nearly gotten away with it. The fog hadn't lifted by the time Caleb Hart pulled into the gravel drive of his cabin just outside Maple Ridge. The low-hung mist still clung to the evergreens, casting long, ghost-like shadows across the yard. The cold was biting now, not from wind, but from silence, the kind that settles in a place where things go unsaid for too long. Caleb opened the passenger door, and the soft creak seemed too loud in the stillness. Curled up on the blanket in the front seat, the 4 German shepherds barely moved. The puppies were huddled together, silent save for the occasional whimper. Kaya, the mother dog, lay protectively over them. Her ribs showed through her fur, which was matted and uneven, with fresh scars layered over old ones. Yet her eyes never left Caleb. They weren't fearful, just tired, watchful. Caleb scooped up the smallest pup-and-ash gray male with a pale stripe on his nose and tucked him gently inside his coat. "I've got you," he murmured. He unlocked the cabin door and led them in. The place was simple. Pinewood floors, faded curtains, a fireplace with kindling stacked beside it. There was an old couch, a modest kitchen, and a framed photo of a younger Caleb in uniform, arms around 2 other officers. He laid blankets near the fireplace and brought out an old quilt his mother had once made. As he settled the dogs down one by one, he picked up his phone. "Elise," he said when the line picked up. "It's Caleb. I've got a situation. 4 dogs, 1 adult, 3 pups. They've been abused, badly. Can you come?" There was no hesitation on the other end. "I'm on my way." Dr. Elise Moreno arrived less than an hour later in a gray Subaru caked with mud. She was in her early 40s, Latina, with dark hair tied into a loose braid and a streak of silver running just above her right ear. She wore a denim jacket, dark jeans, and boots that looked like they'd seen their share of emergencies. Elise was known in Maple Ridge as the vet who never said no, no matter how late the call came. Her manner was brisk but warm, her voice soft but certain, the kind that calmed animals and humans alike. She crouched down the moment she stepped in, scanning the dogs with a trained eye. "Lord," she whispered. "What happened to you guys?" Kaya, ever the protector, growled lowly at first. Elise didn't flinch. She held out her hand, palm open, letting Kaya smell her. The growl ceased. "You're safe now, Mama," she said gently. She examined Kaya first, using a penlight and latex gloves. Her brow furrowed as she lifted fur and traced the jagged lines of healed cuts, bruises, and one particularly nasty scar along the dog's right flank. She checked her ears, teeth, paws, each revealing more neglect than the last. "She's about 6 or 7 years old," Elise said, "and she's been through hell. These wounds, they're not recent, but they're deliberate, not from fighting, not from another dog. These were inflicted." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She's also underfed," Elise continued, voice tightening, "but she prioritized feeding her pups. That's the only reason they're still alive." She moved on to the puppies, 3 of them, all barely 8 weeks old. The ash-gray one was the smallest, and Elise spent the most time checking his gums and heartbeat. The other 2, one with a light golden coat, Willow, and one with a black saddle marking, Scout, were stronger but still malnourished. "Severe vitamin deficiency," Elise said, shaking her head. "They've probably been surviving on scraps. If you hadn't found them today, they wouldn't have made it through the week. Maybe not even tomorrow." Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Caleb opened it to find Mara Duval standing on his porch. Her silver hair was pinned up in a neat bun, and she held a large basket covered with a crocheted cloth. "I heard Elise's car," Mara said simply, stepping inside, "brought some things." She set the basket down and pulled out 3 folded wool blankets and a small bag of homemade chicken broth in mason jars. Caleb blinked, slightly taken aback. "You didn't have to—" "Nonsense," Mara interrupted. "I saw what you carried into that cruiser. And I saw what passed through before you arrived." Caleb paused. "What do you mean?" "Old green pickup," Mara said, brow pinching. "Rusty fenders, broken tail light, crawled by the bridge like it was casing something." Didn't look like a local. Elise and Caleb exchanged glances. Elise broke the silence. "That confirms it. These dogs weren't strays. Someone left them there. Intentionally." Mara looked down at Kaya, who was now resting her head on Caleb's outstretched hand. "And this one," she said softly, "has more strength left than most people I know." As if in agreement, Kaya lifted her head and slowly, gingerly, licked Caleb's wrist. It wasn't just gratitude. It felt like recognition. Later, after Elise had administered fluids and left behind vitamin paste and a special blend of food, Caleb sat near the fireplace with the puppies nestled against him. The smallest, one Ash, curled up inside his hoodie again, nuzzling close to his heartbeat. Willow, the golden pup, whimpered and scratched at his pant leg. Caleb reached down and she placed both front paws on his shin, staring up with round, uncertain eyes. Then Scout, the black-marked male, did something unexpected. He gently grabbed the edge of Caleb's sock with his teeth, tugged once, then laid down at his feet. Caleb let out a small, dry laugh. "You're all gonna make this real hard, aren't you?" he whispered. But even as he said it, he knew it was already too late. They had chosen him. The mist still clung to the outskirts of Maple Ridge like a second skin, as the early morning sun tried and failed to burn through the clouds. Officer Caleb Hart stepped out of his patrol truck with a worn burlap sack folded under his arm. His boots crunched over the gravel lot of Maple Ridge Feed Supply, a modest storefront with chipped green paint and a faded wooden sign swaying in the breeze. The air smelled of hay, damp wood, and something faintly metallic like old nails and rain. Inside, the store was dimly lit, cluttered with hanging coils of rope, dusty bags of feed, and rows of tools that hadn't moved in years. Behind the counter stood Earl Jennings, the owner, a man in his late 60s with a thick belly and an even thicker beard, gray and yellowed at the edges. He wore suspenders over a red flannel shirt, and his eyes narrowed with suspicion the moment Caleb walked in. "You looking for something, officer?" Earl rasped, wiping his hands on a rag already stained with oil. Caleb unfolded the burlap sack and placed it gently on the counter. "I'm hoping you can tell me if this came from here." Earl squinted, adjusted his bifocals, and pinched the edge of the fabric. Printed faintly on the inside was a logo, a leaf inside a circle, with the words Maple Ridge Feed Supply faded beneath it. "Well, I'll be," Earl muttered, frowning. "That's one of ours, all right. Cheap sacks, sold by the dozen. Do you remember who bought a batch recently?" Caleb asked, keeping his voice steady. "Maybe someone came in last week?" Earl scratched his head, bushy brows furrowed. "Hard to say. We get regulars, ranchers mostly. But now that you mention it, there was a group of 3 boys. Not locals, young, scruffy, paid in cash. Didn't say much." Caleb leaned forward. "Anything specific you remember about them?" "One of them had a tattoo on his forearm. Big letters right here," Earl gestured to his own arm, said Crowder. "That ring a bell?" It did. Caleb's pulse quickened. The Crowder name wasn't unknown to law enforcement. The family had a long, unsavory history up in the hills brush-ins with the law for poaching, illegal hunting, and, more disturbingly, a past accusation of running a dog-fighting ring that was never fully proven. They lived in a compound deep in the pines, where cell service died and even the most seasoned deputies didn't venture unless in pairs. Caleb thanked Earl and stepped back into the foggy morning, his mind already spinning. Back at his cabin, nestled near the tree line where the woods thickened into shadow, Kaya was waiting at the door. She rose as soon as she heard the truck and stood guard, her scarred frame tense, one ear cocked, the other bent low. She wasn't barking, but her body was alert, eyes scanning the road before settling on Caleb. The pups, Scout, Willow, and Ash, tumbled out from their makeshift bedding inside, still awkward on their little legs but growing more energetic by the day. Scout, the boldest of the trio with a black saddle marking on his back, bounded toward Caleb's boot and tried to bite his shoelace. Willow followed, more graceful and timid, brushing against his leg. Ash. The runt still lagged behind but had begun watching Caleb with curious eyes, his head tilted as if listening to a silent thought. Caleb crouched, letting the pups crawl into his lap. "You little guys are stronger today," he murmured. They yipped in response. Kaya walked over slowly, her gait still stiff, and nudged his hand with her nose before turning her head sharply toward the road. A low rumble echoed in the distance. A truck passing, too fast for the narrow dirt stretch. She growled. Caleb stood up, following her line of sight. The truck was gone, just a smear of dust in the air, but Kaya didn't relax. Her instincts were sharp like a retired soldier who still felt war in the bones. Caleb knew better than to ignore that. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat at his small kitchen table, the burlap sack spread before him. He kept thinking about the tattoo. Crowder. If the dogs were connected to that family, this wasn't just neglect. It was cruelty, intentional. And if someone had the nerve to leave those animals tied on a train track in broad daylight, what else were they capable of? The pups slept curled in a fleece blanket beside the wood stove. Scout snored. Ash twitched in a dream. Willow's nose poked out from the folds. Kaya didn't sleep. She lay near the front door, eyes open, head resting on her paws, as if daring the world to try again. The wind had changed in Maple Ridge. That morning, Caleb Hart stepped out onto his porch with a mug of lukewarm coffee and a growing sense of unease. The mist clung low, blurring the edges of the pine trees beyond his backyard. The birdsong had gone oddly quiet. Only the creak of the old wooden fence and the occasional yip of the puppies disturbed the hush. Then he saw it, a folded piece of paper pinned to the outer fence post with a blade that shimmered faintly in the early light, a hunting dagger, its handle wrapped in dirty black tape. Caleb's heart sank. He knew that knife wasn't left there by accident. He walked briskly toward it, hand resting on his sidearm out of instinct, eyes scanning the tree line. The note was hastily scrawled, almost feral in tone. "Full moon's near. Return the 4. Or we return for blood." There was no signature, no hint of who had been close enough to approach his home undetected, but he didn't need names. The threat was clear. And the blade, still sticky with sap, hadn't been rusted by time. Whoever had been here was watching, waiting. Inside, Scout and Willow were tumbling over each other on a worn rug, nipping playfully, but Kaya sat apart near the door. Her eyes tracked Caleb as he came back in, clutching the note. She let out a low growl, barely audible, her hackles raised before he even spoke. "Yeah," he murmured to her. "I feel it too." That night, Caleb began the work. He reinforced the window latches and replaced the old back door lock with a new deadbolt. Around the yard, he strung up thin wires connected to bells made from old soda cans and coins, anything that might jingle at the touch of a boot or paw. The forest around his property was dense, but he knew its paths well enough to set up a perimeter. It wasn't much, but it gave him time. And time in a fight meant survival. He didn't stop there. Each pup was given a simple command word and taught to respond to sharp hand signals. Scout, the boldest, took quickly to the game, barking and circling a thrown stick like it was an intruder. Willow was more cautious, learning best by watching her brother. Ash, the smallest, struggled to keep up but barked the loudest more sound than bite. But it was heartening all the same. Kaya, though, needed no training. She already stood guard by the windows at night, ears twitching with every gust of wind, her body taut like a drawn bow. Elise Moreno arrived the next day, her old green Subaru crunching slowly over the gravel path. She stepped out wearing a long tan coat over scrubs, auburn hair tied in a messy bun, and eyes tired from an overnight emergency at the clinic. When Caleb showed her the note, she didn't speak for a long moment. Then she glanced toward Kaya, who was sniffing her usual welcome near Elise's boots. "I don't like this," she said finally, voice low. "Whoever left this isn't random. They're watching you." She knelt and gently patted Kaya's head, then reached into her satchel and pulled out a soft leather collar. It was deep blue with a small silver tag in the shape of a pine cone. The leather looked worn but cared for, stitched by hand. "I made this after her last checkup," Elise explained, "to replace the one she came in with. No animal should ever wear a reminder of pain." She removed the frayed rope still hanging loosely from Kaya's neck and slipped on the new collar. The shepherd sat still the whole time, only blinking when the tag jingled softly against her fur. "Good girl," Elise whispered. "You're safe now." Caleb noticed the vet's hand linger on Kaya's scarred chest a second longer than necessary. Elise, who rarely let emotions leak through her calm, clinical tone, stood with her fists clenched tight. As Elise turned to leave, Mara Duval was walking up the path, wrapped in a heavy wool shawl the color of wet stone. She was in her early 70s, with sharp cheekbones, a thin mouth, and clear blue eyes that rarely missed a thing. Though most in town thought she was just a lonely widow with too many cats, Caleb had learned she was anything but fragile. "I brought you something," Mara said without preamble, holding out a small object wrapped in linen. It was a handbell old, bronze, and etched with faded flowers along the rim. Its handle was smoothed from years of use. Caleb took it, puzzled. "My mother used it during storms," she explained, her voice lower now. "Said when the wind howled loud enough to scare your bones, ringing this would call back whatever courage had left you." She paused, looking toward the forest. "And maybe someone else will hear it too." Caleb nodded slowly, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Mara." "No thanks needed." Just don't let fear keep you silent. That night he placed the bell by his nightstand. Outside, the moon began to swell, and Kaya hurried back to the door. Her ears perked, her scars shining under moonlight, refused to sleep. The moon rose like a silent sentinel over Maple Ridge, cloaking the forest in silver and shadows. Frost clung to the edges of Caleb Hart's window panes, blurring the world into dreamlike stillness. His log cabin sat quiet beneath the pines, the fire inside glowing low and warm. But inside Caleb's chest the air was tight, tense, expectant. He hadn't slept much since the note. The words still rang in his head like a curse. "Full moon comes. Return the 4. Or else." It wasn't just a threat, it was a challenge. And tonight, the moon was full. Kaya lay beside the cabin's back door, her frame still lean, though muscle had begun to return with regular meals. Her sable coat shimmered under the low lamplight. The new blue leather collar Elise had given her wrapped gently around her neck, a soft counterpoint to the rope scars hidden beneath. Her ears twitched at every sound, every rustle of pine needles beyond the wooden fence. Scout and Willow were curled together by the wood stove, dreaming the restless dreams of puppies. Wren, always the alert one, was perched near the window. His ears, not yet upright but growing stronger, twitched at distant howls or wind-blown twigs. Caleb, now in a gray long-sleeve shirt and brown work vest, stood at the dining table, checking the perimeter one last time. He'd installed tripwire chimes all around the back garden. Simple brass bells strung on fishing line. Crude, maybe, but effective. He'd placed one above the back gate, another near the woodshed, and the last by the vegetable patch. And just in case, Mara's small bronze handbell sat on the kitchen counter, its handle polished smooth from age and use. Mara had handed it to him 2 nights ago with her usual brisk tenderness. The older woman, short and wiry with silver hair tied in a scarf, had simply said, "When fear grips your throat, ring it. Someone will hear." The clock ticked past midnight. Caleb had just settled into the armchair when it happened. Clink, the faintest jingle from the yard. Kaya was up before Caleb could even breathe. She stood tall and stiff, blocking the back door like a guardian. Her eyes locked onto the darkness beyond the window, and her tail was down, steady, not wagging, not afraid, ready. Ash sprang from the rug, barking sharply. His young voice cracked through the stillness like a firecracker. Willow followed, low growls rattling in her chest. Scout hesitated, then yipped, pressing against Caleb's leg. Caleb flicked the outside floodlight on. Harsh yellow light flooded the backyard. Trees cast long, quivering shadows. For a second there was nothing. Then movement. Near the woodshed fence, a figure male, lean, maybe mid-20s, half-crouched, gripping the top of the wooden fence. Hood up, face obscured, dressed in dark clothes, hands gloved. The man froze under the floodlight, then slowly dropped back to the ground. Kaya snarled low, hackles bristling. She didn't move from the door. "Don't," Caleb muttered under his breath, gripping the doorknob but not turning it. He wasn't going to give chase. Not yet. Let them show their cards. 2 more shapes appeared briefly behind the first, further back in the tree line. They didn't speak. They didn't move forward, just stood watching, the way predators test prey from a distance. Then, without warning, they all retreated, slipped back into the woods as fast as they had come. No weapons, no attempt to enter, just a test. Caleb stood there, breathing hard. Not from fear, but anger. These people weren't amateurs, they weren't drunk teenagers pulling pranks. They were watching, measuring, waiting for weakness. By the time he let the dogs out to sniff, the men were long gone. Kaya circled the back fence, sniffing deeply. Her body was rigid with unease, but her tail flicked once in reassurance before she trotted back to Caleb and leaned into his leg. Later that morning, Elise came by with supplies. She'd brought more dog food, fresh antibiotics for Willow's upset stomach, and a clipboard of notes. She stepped out of her old tan Subaru wearing a navy peacoat, black leggings, and red boots stained with barn mud. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a thick braid beneath a wool hat. Despite the hour, her eyes were sharp. "You said they didn't try to break in?" she asked as Caleb poured coffee into mismatched mugs. "No, they stayed back. Just one climbed partway up the fence, like they were watching how the dogs would react." Elisa's brow furrowed. She knelt to examine Wren's ears as he leaned into her, tail wagging furiously. "That's not random," she murmured. "That's conditioning. In dog fighting, especially the underground rings, they test the reactions of potential fighters. They want to see who'll bark, who'll freeze, who'll submit." Caleb stiffened. "You think this was training?" "More like reconnaissance," she said. "These dogs were probably taken from a fighting circuit, or bred to join one. The way Kaya guards the door, that's not just maternal instinct. That's training." Caleb looked out the window. The frost was melting in streaks, revealing the pine needles beneath. The sky was starting to warm. "I need to talk to someone about the Crowders," he said, voice low. "There's more to this." Elise stood, brushing Wren's fur off her knees. She glanced toward the sleeping puppies, then back at Caleb. "They're scared, Caleb. But they're not broken." "I know," he said quietly. "Neither am I." That night he placed the bronze bell by the front door. Just in case. The first snow of the season came gentle and slow, like powdered sugar sifted over the cabin roof. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the scent of damp fir and cedar wood. Caleb Hart crouched by the copper tub in his small kitchen. Sleeves rolled past his elbows as he bathed Kaya, the German shepherd who had saved more lives in silence than most men with words. Steam curled around them, and the soft sound of water sloshing echoed off the pine walls. Kaya was unusually still today, not from fear or pain, but from trust. Caleb rubbed the lather into her thick sable coat, his hand slowing as he reached her neck. His fingers brushed something hard, unnatural beneath her fur. He froze. Kaya turned her head slightly, sensing the tension ripple through him. With gentle fingers, he parted her fur and found a tiny black disc barely the size of a coin, nestled beneath an old scar. It was tethered to her collar stitching by a thin piece of surgical thread. A tracker. His breath caught in his throat. "Elise needs to see this," he murmured, drying Kaya's fur in slow, deliberate strokes. Within the hour, Elise Moreno arrived at the cabin in her mud-speckled Subaru, carrying her worn leather vet kit. Her curly chestnut hair was pulled into a bun, snowflakes clinging to her wool coat as she stepped inside. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting her bag down. "I might have," Caleb replied, holding up the tiny device with a trembling hand. "I found this in Kaya's neck. She's been tracked." Elisa's brows furrowed as she took the chip from him. She squinted at it under the cabin's low light, her breath sharp with realization. "This isn't just any tracker," she said. "There's a medical chip embedded in the housing. Let me scan it." She retrieved a small scanner from her bag and hovered it over the chip. A green light blinked twice, then beeped. The screen lit up with a code. Project DR9. Her lips parted. "This is..." "Caleb, this is from a discontinued military program. A K-9 combat training initiative. I remember hearing whispers about it when I was interning at the state vet hospital. The project was shut down 4 years ago. Ethical concerns. Experimental aggression conditioning. These dogs were never supposed to go to the public." Caleb sat back in stunned silence, his eyes slowly turning toward Kaya, who now lay curled by the stove, one eye half open, watching them. "You think she was part of that?" he asked, voice low. Elise nodded slowly. "I'd bet my license on it. Someone branded her with that project, then dumped her." Or she escaped Caleb's jaw clenched. The puzzle was starting to fit in terrible ways. The men who left that note, they're not just dog fighters. They're trying to erase something. She's not just valuable. She's dangerous to them. Or maybe she knows something they want kept buried. He stood and began pacing. They didn't just come for the puppies. They came to reclaim her. A log in the stove crackled loudly, as if affirming the revelation. Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees. Kaya didn't move from her spot, but her eyes followed every motion Caleb made. She understood. He could feel it. Elise walked over and knelt beside the dog, placing a hand gently on her neck. She's still got the scarring from the embedded device. I can remove it fully now, but if we do, and they're still pinging it, they'll know we found it, Caleb finished for her. Let them. Maybe it's time we stop playing defense. Ash, the smallest of the three puppies, ambled in from the hallway, a chewed slipper dangling from his mouth. He was all ears and clumsy paws, with a streak of darker fur along his back. His tail wagged as he dropped the slipper at Caleb's feet. Your guard dog needs to work on subtlety, Caleb muttered, cracking a half-smile. Elise chuckled. They're growing fast. Did you notice Scout's been guarding the porch every morning? And Willow actually barked at her reflection yesterday. Progress, Caleb said softly, watching as Kaya stretched and nose-dashed back toward the sleeping pile of pups near the hearth. There was comfort in the little things, quiet domestic rhythms that masked the storm building just beyond the tree line. Elise looked up. I want to suggest something. Just for a few days. Let me take Kaya to my clinic. She'll be safe. I have reinforced kennels, and we can run a full scan for any other implants or scarring. Caleb shook his head slowly. She won't go. I tried getting her into the truck earlier this week for a checkup. She froze. Doesn't trust enclosed spaces anymore, and I won't force her. Elise sighed, understanding. Then I'll come here, every day. I'll bring the scanner, tools, antibiotics, whatever she needs. Thank you, he said, his voice heavy with something deeper than gratitude. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the flames flicker in the stove. Snow tapped against the windows like fingertips from another world. As Elise gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. There's something else. The file number on that chip. It's not random. It's part of a classified set. Someone out there still has access to that database. If they're tracking Kaya, they know she's alive, and if they know she's here, then we don't have much time, Caleb finished grimly. Elise nodded and stepped into the snow. As the cabin door closed, Kaya lifted her head and let out a low, warning growl toward the dark beyond the window. It was not a growl of fear, but of memory. Caleb sat beside her and placed a steady hand on her back. We'll protect them, he whispered. All of them. Whatever it takes. The air that morning tasted of metal and pine, dampened by the fog that clung low between the evergreens. Caleb Hart stood on the porch of the cabin, thermos in hand, his gray eyes fixed westward where the trees turned thick and shadowed. Behind him, the fireplace crackled faintly, and inside, the three puppies were fast asleep, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm near Mara's boots. But Kaya wasn't inside. She was by Caleb's side, always. The 10-year-old German shepherd sat upright, ears twitching at every distant rustle. Her sable coat shimmered where the early light kissed the silver streaks along her back. The scar on her hind leg tugged slightly with each shift of her weight, but her alertness never waned. An anonymous voicemail had arrived at dawn. There's a shack out by Ash Creek. No one's used it in years, but I heard barking, screaming. Just thought someone should know Caleb didn't trust anonymous tips. But he trusted his gut, and right now it told him to go. Alone, if possible. He turned to Elise and Mara, who were tending to the pups. I'll go check it out, he said. Just me and Kaya. Elise Moreno looked up from brushing Ash's patchy fur. The veterinarian's brown hair was tied back loosely today, strands escaping around her soft features. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" He shook his head. "If it's what I think, I need to move fast." Quiet Mara, always blunt and practical, tightened the wool blanket around Scout. "You get a bad feeling?" she asked. "I get the sense someone wants us to." He clipped Kaya's tactical harness in place. As soon as it snapped, the dog stood, body taut, eyes sharp. She was ready. Before leaving, he turned back. "Don't let anyone near the cabin while I'm gone." And then they disappeared into the trees. The trek to Ash Creek wasn't easy. The trail wound through fallen logs and dew-slick moss, the kind of path only hunters or old hermits used. But Kaya was purposeful. She led them through without hesitation, nose low, tail rigid. After nearly an hour, the shack came into view. A skeletal structure, gray wood eaten by years of weather. The roof slouched to one side, windows boarded with mismatched planks. The only sign of life was a broken lantern swaying in the cold breeze. But Kaya growled the moment she stepped within 20 feet of it. "Easy," Caleb whispered. She didn't listen. Instead, she lunged toward the side of the cabin and began clawing at the soft ground near the wall. Caleb crouched and began digging with his hands. Just beneath the surface was a hollow pit, boarded up crudely. Inside, he found a pile of torn burlap sacks like the ones that had covered Kaya's eyes. A rusted chain and a cracked security camera, lens shattered but the red light still blinked faintly. He didn't have time to process it. A branch snapped behind them. He turned, and two figures emerged from the tree line. One was tall, wiry, wearing a black rain jacket with the hood low. The other broader, face obscured by a ski mask, hands gloved. Neither spoke, but they moved fast. The tall one lunged toward Caleb, pulling a knife from his belt. The broad one ran at Kaya, swinging a heavy pipe. Caleb rolled backward, barely avoiding the blade. He kicked the attacker's knee, then slammed his shoulder into the man's chest. The impact sent them both to the ground. Fists flew. Caleb grabbed the man's wrist and twisted the knife free, but not before catching a gash across his own arm. Meanwhile, Kaya met the second man head-on. The pipe swung down. She ducked, twisted, and clamped her jaws onto his forearm. He screamed, dropping the weapon. She drove her weight into him, knocking him off balance. Blood stained his sleeve as he staggered back. The taller man tried to grab his partner, but Caleb tackled him again, this time slamming his fist into the man's face. There was a crunch nose or jaw, he couldn't tell. Kaya circled, barking violently, her tail low, teeth bared. The two men finally scrambled up, breathing hard, bleeding, and fled into the woods. Caleb lifted his phone, filming their retreating backs. Before disappearing completely, the broader one turned and snarled. She was ours. She still is. Then they were gone. Caleb stood for a moment, heart hammering. Blood dripped from his forearm onto the leaves below. Kaya returned to his side, panting, her muzzle streaked with red, but not her own. He crouched and held her face gently. "You all right, girl?" She let out a quiet huff and nudged his chin. They didn't linger. Caleb grabbed the camera, the chain, and the burlap sacks, and they headed back toward the cabin with urgency in every step. When they arrived, Elise rushed to the porch. "You're bleeding." "It's shallow," Caleb muttered. "Just need to clean it." Inside, Mara was standing with a hammer in one hand and Ash tucked under the other arm like a loaf of bread. "Someone came?" she asked. He nodded. "Two men." Tried to take her back, Elise paled. "You mean Kaya?" "I mean they knew her. They wanted her, but they didn't expect a fight." Mara placed Ash back into the crate with his siblings. "Did you get their faces?" "No. But I got their threats." And their blood Kaya was already by the door, lying watchfully, eyes never blinking. "They'll come back," Caleb said, "but next time we'll be ready." The morning sun filtered softly through the pines, casting dappled golden patterns across Caleb's cabin porch. A gentle breeze rustled the wind chimes above, their music mixing with the occasional excited bark from the puppies in the yard. The storm had passed, not just the literal one, but the one that had haunted Caleb's home and Kaya's past for weeks. Now, resolution began to bloom where fear once lingered. With the footage Caleb had captured from the hidden forest shack, complete with images of broken chains, rusted restraints, and the fierce confrontation with the two masked assailants, the case reached new heights. One of the attackers, limping away with a bloodied arm from Kaya's bite, had left a partial fingerprint on the shack's broken window. The other had dropped a burner phone, which Elise later found in a bush behind the cabin. That phone contained coordinates and encrypted messages, all of which Caleb turned over to Agent Javier Morales, a tall, no-nonsense man in his early 30s-50s with a clipped mustache and a rumpled federal windbreaker who had just arrived from the FBI's Animal Trafficking Task Force. Agent Morales, after reviewing the evidence, immediately launched a multi-state investigation. "This isn't just a backyard operation," he told Caleb. "We're talking a full-blown network illegal canine training, dog fighting, experimental conditioning. Kaya may be the key witness in a case we've been trying to crack for years." While the legal wheels began turning, the emotional healing in Pinewood unfolded in quieter, more tender ways. The town council, urged by Elise and several volunteers, organized an adoption day in front of the town library. Posters featured Scout, Willow, and Ash now, plump with health, their fur shiny and eyes alert, each with their own little sign written in chalk. Looking for a forever home. Scout, the boldest and most agile of the trio, drew attention from Officer Landon Rhodes, a young deputy with tousled blonde hair and a playful grin who had always dreamed of training a canine partner. After a short demonstration, Scout retrieving a ball, responding to simple commands, and even giving Landon a paw on request, the bond was instant. Landon crouched beside him and whispered, "You're gonna be my partner, little guy." "Let's catch bad guys together." Caleb nodded with quiet approval. Willow, ever the gentle and sensitive one, sat a little distance away, shyly observing the crowd. A young girl with a cochlear implant approached her, led by her mother. Her name was Lily, about 7 years old, with dark curls and big brown eyes full of wonder. When Lily knelt and placed her hand on Willow's head, something passed between them, an unspoken thread of comfort and understanding. Lily didn't speak, but she smiled, and Willow leaned into her. The match was perfect. Ash, rambunctious as ever, drew a group of rowdy children, but it was a pair of identical twins, Milo and Mason, both wearing overalls and cowboy boots, who won him over. Their parents owned a small homestead just outside town. "We've got fields, chickens, and more mud than sense," their father chuckled. "He'll have his paws full." Meanwhile, Kaya remained lying on the front porch of the cabin, head lifted, eyes calmly tracking each of her pups as they were led away. She didn't whimper. She didn't bark. She just watched. And when Ash gave one last playful yap before leaping into the pickup truck with the twins, Kaya lowered her head to her paws and exhaled deeply, as if releasing the last threads of tension she had carried. Caleb stepped onto the porch and knelt beside her. He gently scratched behind her ear, just the way she liked, and whispered, "You don't have to growl anymore, girl. The bad ones are gone. This place, it's safe now." That evening, as twilight draped the trees in soft indigo hues, Caleb built a fire in the pit outside. He sat in his usual spot, wrapped in a worn blanket, a chipped mug of tea in hand. Kaya lay close, her breathing steady and soft. On the small table beside him was a letter creased at the corners, the handwriting delicate and familiar. It was from his younger sister, Hannah, who had moved across the country years ago after a falling out that neither of them had truly mended. He opened it slowly. Inside, her words were hesitant but warm. She had heard what happened in Pinewood through mutual friends, and after watching the news story about the dog-fighting ring being busted, she wrote, "I saw the photo of you and Kaya. You look tired, but proud. I think maybe it's time we talk again. Come home for Christmas? I'd love for the kids to meet you. And Kaya, too." The edges of Caleb's mouth curled into a rare smile. He folded the letter gently, slid it into his jacket pocket, and looked up at the stars just beginning to flicker above the tree line. "I'm coming home, Hannah," he murmured. "But this time, I won't be coming alone." Kaya raised her head as if sensing his words and nudged his leg softly. She would always carry scars, just like him. But the cabin wasn't just shelter anymore. It was healing ground, a final stop on a road long traveled, and a place where every soul who entered, whether on 2 legs or 4, could finally rest. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't come as loud explosions or flashing lights. They come in the form of quiet loyalty, the gentle eyes of a rescued dog, or the warmth of a second chance. Kaya had every reason to give up on humanity. She had been abused, abandoned, and broken. But by the grace of God, she found her way to Caleb, a man just as scarred, just as lost. Together, they created a home not just for themselves, but for others who needed one too. This story reminds us that healing is possible, that redemption is real, and that God often sends his angels on 4 legs and with wagging tails. If you believe that love can heal, if you believe that every living being deserves a second chance, if you believe that God still works miracles through the quiet acts of kindness we offer each other, then type Amen in the comments and be part of this message of hope. Share this story with someone who needs encouragement today. Comment below your thoughts or a time when God brought healing into your life. Subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching stories of courage, loyalty, and grace. May God bless you, your home, and all the creatures who walk beside you. Amen.